How did refugees hiding in swamps build the richest trade empire in Europe? In 476 CE, Rome fell. The safety of civilization vanished overnight. Families fled into the Adriatic marshes with nothing. No roads, no walls, no empire left to protect them. Yet from that desperate refuge, they would construct a secret empire that dominated Mediterranean commerce, operated history's most feared intelligence network, and endured for 1,000 years. What turned these displaced survivors into the invisible masters of the medieval world? In the wake of Rome's collapse, the world that had once promised order and protection dissolved into uncertainty. The year 476 CE did not just mark the end of an emperor. It shattered the network of roads, laws, and garrisons that had held northern Italy together for centuries. Overnight, the familiar patterns of life vanished. Farmers in the Veneto plains awoke to the sound of distant war horns and the sight of smoke on the horizon. The old imperial boundaries crumbled, leaving towns exposed to the ambitions of every warlord and wandering army that crossed the Alps. Gothic warbands swept through the countryside, their raids unpredictable and merciless. Villages that had known peace for generations found their gates battered down, their markets stripped bare. The Lombards, arriving in waves after 568 CE, carved their own path of conquest across the Po Valley. No guarantee of safety remained. No legion would answer a cry for help. Even the grandest cities, with their marble temples and mosaic churches, became little more than targets. The land itself turned hostile, as fields once carefully tended by Roman hands fell to ruin and wild growth. Families who could escape gathered what they could carry and set out for the uncertain refuge of the marshes. The familiar stone roads led only to burned bridges and abandoned outposts. Some fled by night, loading children and elders onto wagons, hoping to reach the water before the next raid. Others wandered in small groups, guided by rumor and desperation. Letters from the era, such as those of Cassiodorus, describe the fear that drove people to the edge of the known world, seeking shelter in places no army could easily follow. The lagoons of the Adriatic, once dismissed as wasteland, became a last resort. Here, the tides and mud offered a barrier that neither horse nor siege engine could easily cross. But these islands provided only the barest protection. There were no city walls, no granaries, no order, just shifting sandbars and brackish water. The refugees arrived with little more than memories of the world they had lost, and the hope that the chaos on the mainland could not reach them here. Yet even in this bleakness, the seeds of something new took root. The collapse of imperial safety forced a generation to rethink where security could be found. In the silence after the fall, a scattered people gathered in the mist and began, quietly, to shape their own fate. The rise of Venice would begin not with triumph, but with the slow, uncertain movement of the displaced, driven by fear, but carrying with them the remnants of Roman knowledge and the will to survive. In the lagoon's hidden corners, the story of a secret empire was just beginning. The first arrivals stepped onto islands barely more than humps of mud, their footprints swallowed by the tide. Yet, within a generation, these scattered refugees began to stitch together a fragile order. Cassiodorus, writing in 537 CE, addressed his letter to the Tribuni Maritimi, the maritime magistrates of the lagoon. He described a people living in houses woven from reeds, but already organizing the movement of boats and the sharing of grain. The letter's tone is both practical and astonished. Here, At the edge of the world he knew, Roman habits of governance had not vanished. Instead, they had taken root in the marshes. Archaeological evidence now confirms that by the mid-6th century, the lagoon was no longer empty. Radiocarbon samples from the islands of Torcello and Murano date wooden piles and domestic debris to around 540 to 560 CE. These findings match the timeline of 3 great pulses of migration, each wave driven by a new storm of violence on the mainland. The first, in the shadow of the Huns and Goths, brought artisans and farmers fleeing burning towns. The second, in the wake of the Lombard advance after 568, swelled the population with entire families abandoning their fields for the uncertain safety of water. The third, as Avars and Suabians raided the Po Delta, drew yet more people to the islands, now watched over by Byzantine patrols and administered by the Tribuni Maritimi. Early churches rose from the mud, their foundations marked by the names of patrons remembered in later chronicles: Barbarigo, Mocenigo, Gritti. These families, once fugitives, became the ancestors of the Venetian patriciate. The first basilicas, San Luca on Torcello, San Giulio on Murano, and Santa Maria Assunta, were more than places of worship. They were anchors of community, signs that the refugees intended to stay. Burial grounds on Torcello show generations living and dying in the same place. Grave goods shifting from Roman styles to something new, shaped by the lagoon. The Tribuni Maritimi, acting as a collegial body, managed disputes, coordinated grain shipments, and oversaw the first embankments. Their statutes, preserved in later legal codes, allowed the refugees to retain Roman property rights and be judged under familiar law. This continuity, woven through hardship, laid the groundwork for a civic tradition that would outlast empires. In the silence between tides, the outline of a city began to appear, not as a sudden miracle, but as the slow accumulation of memory, custom, and necessity. The rise of Venice began here, among the reeds and salt air, with a community that refused to let go of order even as the world around them dissolved. Venice began as a place where survival meant invention. With no solid ground, settlers turned to the lagoon's only constant: waterlogged mud and shifting tides. Their solution was both simple and radical. Teams of workers swinging heavy wooden mallets called bat drove oak and larch trunks deep into the silt. Some piles reached 12 meters, disappearing into the mud until only the tops remained visible. The pounding echoed across the water, announcing each new foundation. What seemed temporary became permanent. The lagoon's briny water and oxygen-poor mud formed a natural shield protecting the wood from decay. Over decades, saltwater minerals seeped into the heartwood, leaving behind a calcified rind hard as stone and resistant to rot. Modern core samples still reveal traces of iodine and brine, evidence of the chemistry that transformed wood into the city's skeleton. Life above the water was just as precarious. Early homes balanced on reed platforms, but as families multiplied, the need for stability grew. Builder guilds emerged, organizing labor and knowledge. The Fabbricatori di Palafite and Corporazioni di Muratori trained apprentices in pile driving and platform construction. Masters set wage scales and enforced standards. Payroll ledgers from the Rialto Basin show Battisti earning half a ducat a day, while stone handlers received slightly more. Each guild marked its work with a seal, a hammer over a pile, still visible on ancient lintels. These symbols, carved in stone, are silent witnesses to the city's origins. With little arable land, the lagoon's economy turned to salt and fish. Along the edges of Lido and Sacca Fesola, Salt pans shimmered in the sun. Clay-lined basins fed by wooden sluices trapped seawater, which evaporated under dry winds, leaving behind crystals of halite. Salt was more than a seasoning. It preserved food, funded public works, and became Venice's first export. 9th century tax records list annual outputs of up to 2,000 tons per saltern, with workers paid in coin and a share of the harvest. Salt guilds, often extended families, maintained the dikes and collected the mineral. Some of this salt traveled medieval trade routes, a taste of Venice before marble palaces lined the canals. Fishing filled the gaps. Small boats built from larch glided through the channels at dawn. Nets brought in sardines, anchovies, and mullet, species thriving in brackish water. The catch was dried and salted, creating a portable food supply that could last through winter or be traded for timber. Archaeological layers reveal fish bones mingled with salt crystals, a quiet record of daily life. Surplus from salt and fishing funded timber purchases, expanding the palafit network. Each season, the islands grew more stable, neighborhoods rising above the waterline. By the 11th century, builder guilds coordinated large-scale projects, from the Rialto market's foundations to embankments for future stone palaces. Their statutes regulated apprenticeship, wages, and quality. In the slow, methodical work of building on water, Venice's true character emerged. Ingenuity, cooperation, and hard-won knowledge, written in every submerged pile and enduring stone. By the 12th century, Venice's markets had outgrown their beginnings as salt and fish stalls. The Rialto now buzzed with goods from across the Mediterranean. Venetian merchants, methodical and outward-looking, sent galleys packed with glass, wool, and timber to distant ports, returning with silk from Byzantium, pepper from Alexandria, and grain from Dalmatia. These were not isolated trips. Each spring and autumn, convoys of Venetian galleys slipped out along medieval trade routes, their sails set for Constantinople, the Levant, and Flanders. The Republic's reach extended with every voyage, its flag a familiar sight from Acre to Bruges. Trade on this scale demanded more than daring captains. It required trust, and trust demanded invention. In the early 13th century, Venetian merchants adopted the Bill of Exchange, a slip of parchment that replaced chests of silver on dangerous journeys. Signed and sealed, these bills promised payment in far-off cities, allowing debts to be settled without moving coins. The first bills of exchange appeared in Rialto's ledgers, written in careful script. Credit now moved faster than any ship, connecting buyers and sellers from Venice to Alexandria or Bruges. Foreign traders marveled at the speed and reliability of Venetian finance, noting how a letter from Venice could unlock a warehouse on another continent. Every transaction was recorded in double-entry ledgers, down to the last grosso. These records, still preserved in the Archivio di Stato, reveal the machinery of a commercial empire. Payrolls list dockworkers, porters, and scribes, each paid in ducats or denarii. The Rialto market, once wooden stalls, became a stone maze where fortunes shifted with the price of pepper or the arrival of a grain fleet. The air filled with the sound of coins, the rustle of parchment, and the low voices of brokers. Beyond the market, the real engine of Venetian power worked behind the high walls of the arsenal. Here, thousands of laborers assembled ships piece by piece. Timber from the Alps arrived by raft, sorted and cut in the carpenter's yard. Hulls took shape on the docks, smiths forged anchors, and sailmakers stitched canvas in long workshops. Payroll ledgers from the 15th century detailed daily wages: 2 ducats for a skilled carpenter, 3 for a master smith, and 1.5 for a sailmaker. In times of crisis, the arsenal could turn out 9 galleys in a single month, unmatched by any rival. Venice's enemies watched this output with unease, knowing that convoys would soon return to sea, guarded by fleets built in these secret yards. As Venice's wealth grew, so did the risks. Merchant convoys became targets for pirates and rival states. Routes that brought prosperity also brought danger. Captains traveled in armed groups, manifests coded, orders sealed. The city's wealth, built on ledgers and contracts, drew envy and suspicion. Beneath the glamour, the true story of Venice was written in the steady rhythm of hammers echoing across the arsenal. Behind the shimmer of the Grand Canal, the real machinery of the Venetian Empire worked in silence. In 1310, as rival powers circled and conspiracies flickered in candlelit halls, Venice established the Council of Ten, a body so secretive that even its own records were locked away behind iron doors. 10 men chosen from the city's oldest families met in a chamber above the Doge's palace. Their mandate: preserve the Republic's security by any means, answerable to no one but the Great Council and the shadows that lingered in the corridors of power. The Council of Ten became the nerve center of a hidden network. Their eyes and ears stretched from the arsenal's forges to the distant ports of the Levant. Merchant captains doubled as informants. Scribes coded letters in invisible ink, and even the city's gondoliers sometimes carried whispered messages along the moonlit waterways. Every foreign envoy, every visiting merchant was watched. The council's spies, known as spionieri, moved quietly through embassies and counting houses, collecting rumors of war, ship movements, and markets abroad. Venice's edge was not just in gold or ships, but in information. The relazioni system, perfected over centuries, required every ambassador to submit detailed reports on the politics, alliances, and secrets of foreign courts. These dossiers piled up in the council's archives, forming a living map of the medieval trade routes and the ambitions of Venice's rivals. In the city's most guarded rooms, the 10 weighed these reports, plotting moves that would keep their secret empire one step ahead. In 1473, a Venetian agent in Smyrna secured a set of Ottoman cannon designs, smuggling the plans back to the arsenal in a false-bottomed chest. No detail escaped their notice. Such operations gave Venice a technological lead in naval warfare, and the council's reputation for invisible power grew. In the forgotten history of Europe, few institutions inspired more awe and fear than the 10. Their decisions, always cloaked in secrecy, shaped the rise of Venice, protecting its wealth, its trade, and its place as the most enigmatic state on the water. In the stillness of the night, the city's fate rested not on armies, but on the quiet calculations of those hidden behind closed doors. At the height of its power, the Venetian Empire stretched like a web across the sea, its threads anchored in distant harbors, fortified islands, and the bustling heart of the Lagoon. The city's great experiment, building a secret empire on water, reached its most dazzling expression under the rule of Doge Enrico Dandolo. In 1204, Dandolo steered the Fourth Crusade not to Jerusalem, but to Constantinople. The Crusaders' banners, meant for the Holy Land, instead fluttered over the shattered gates of Byzantium. Venetian galleys carried home the spoils: gold, marble, silks, and the relics of saints. The bones of St. Mark, smuggled from Alexandria centuries earlier in 828, had already crowned Venice with a sacred identity. Now, with the treasures of Byzantium, the city dressed itself in mosaics and marble, the Basilica di San Marco glittering as a monument to both faith and conquest. Colonial outposts blossomed across the Mediterranean. Crete, seized in 1205, became the empire's granary and sugar bowl. Ports like Corfu and Modon guarded the medieval trade routes that fed Venice's markets with grain, spices, and silk. The Rialto's ledgers grew heavy with the profits of distant colonies, each entry a quiet record of how the city's reach had become global. These holdings, scattered but tightly managed, formed a secret empire, one that rarely announced itself with armies, but moved quietly through treaties, trade, and the silent influence of gold. Yet, even as Venice rose, shadows gathered. In 1348, the Black Death swept through the city, claiming nearly a third of its people. The plague left empty houses and silent workshops, the arsenal's hammers falling quiet. Recovery was slow, and the city's grip on its far-flung colonies weakened with every new outbreak and every war. The Ottoman Empire pressed from the east, capturing ports and threatening the lifelines of Venetian commerce. Meanwhile, Portuguese ships rounded the Cape of Good Hope, shifting the world's trade to the Atlantic and leaving the old medieval routes to fade. By the end of the 18th century, the city that had once seemed untouchable faced an enemy it could not outwit. In 1797, Napoleon's army arrived at the Lagoon's edge. The Treaty of Campo Formio signed away 1,000 years of independence. The rise of Venice, so improbable and so enduring, finally gave way to silence. The canals remained, but the secret empire slipped into forgotten history. Its power dissolved like morning mist over the water. In a world where borders shift and cities rise from uncertainty, the forgotten history of the Venetian Empire lingers beneath quiet waters. Today, ancient canals still echo with secrets of medieval trade routes and ambition. The rise of Venice reminds us that out of fragility, entire worlds can emerge and vanish, leaving only whispers for those who listen. Let the mystery drift with you into sleep. Share your thoughts in the comments below.